Story 1. The bank account would have $20 million. Our stress levels would drop significantly. The mortgage would be paid off. My wife would give notice at work but would stay on as long as it takes to train a replacement because she is not a monster. Why would this have any impact on our marriage? We would just own more stupid stuff. Story 2. My wife would probably ask me how to invest her money properly so we can live off the interest for the rest of our lives. Then we would have a lovely time together doing whatever we wanted. Overall, pretty positive. Story 3. If the marriage was strained because of money issues, this may improve it. If the marriage was strained for other reasons, money will not help. If the marriage was lovely, it will remain lovely and will have much more money to spend. Story 4. A strong marriage, $20 million, and basic financial literacy would have an astronomical impact. Story 5. Invest. Sleep for a week. Trust fund for kids. Vacation. Tell no one. That is why you do not quit just yet. Story 6. We would invest to make sure we had income each month, open a business, and travel around the world. Story 7. Invest it and never have to work again. Purchase a property with a house large enough to accommodate my mother. Story 8. We would argue about where to move. Other than that, life would be as usual. Story 9. We would retire immediately and celebrate together. We would invest in real estate, start several businesses, ensure both our parents are taken care of, and then begin trying to have a few more children to build a large family. Story 10. In a long-term marriage, each of us would have $10 million. We would work together on some things while keeping our money in separate accounts. Story 11. We would quit our jobs and enjoy life together without the stress of work. Story 12. That would help greatly with future planning. It would give us more time together instead of mindlessly working just to put food on the table, and if we earn more than enough, it would mean more for our children. Story 13. Zero impact. We would have $20 million to retire, give some to our kids, and start traveling 4 to 5 times a year. Story 14. We could finish many projects we have planned, mostly building structures for animals and installing fencing. We would finally have children. That would be great. Story 15. The divorce would be over before we could finish saying the word divorce. Story 16. We would jointly have $20 million. We have been together for more than 30 years now, and that has included richer and poorer. I would not expect it to change anything in our marriage. It would make things better because I could pay someone to clean the house and do the laundry, and we could do whatever we pleased whenever we wanted. Story 17. We would both start winding down our careers. After setting aside enough for a comfortable retirement, we would help our families pay off their mortgages. Then we would enjoy the rest of our lives and travel. Story 18. Leave this decaying country. Move abroad and invite my entire family to live on our estate. 10 million should do it. Invest the rest to live off. Story 19. We would be able to afford to own rather than rent a house. Invest it wisely so we can live off it for the rest of our lives. Splurge on a truck newer than the 2008 Golf I am driving now. Let the kids pick out whatever they want at Toys R Us. Eat sushi far more often. Everyone in the family loves it. Pay off our parents' mortgages. Take the whole family on a nice vacation. Story 20. Likely divorce. Things are not great at the moment, and the cash would remove a barrier. Story 21. She quit her job and she has earned that. I am an hourly contractor, so I would keep working but tell my boss I want to work only 24 hours a week unless there is a specific project or audit I need to support. I like my job. Other than that, buy a house in a nice neighborhood where I can still afford the taxes and add a pottery studio for her. Invest the rest and live off the interest. Probably travel first class, but still only have energy for one international trip a year. Work on training for the Appalachian Trail, since paid time off would no longer be a limiting factor. I do not really need more stuff. Maybe a fun summer car to use alongside the 10-year-old daily driver, which I would keep. I think Toyota just released a new Supra, which could be fun if it is not a twin-turbo death machine. Story 22. My wife would continue working 40 hours a week. I would open a non-profit third space where people could hang out and play board games, with supervised childcare so parents can leave their children and play a game of Catan. Story 23. We would immediately retire and travel the world. We only have so much time on this planet, and most of us must use it to earn money to live a decent life. If the financial part is taken care of, we suddenly have the rest of our lives to enjoy without toiling for a paycheck. Story 24. I would put 20 million in the bank, quit our current jobs, and live off the interest while administering scholarship and home purchase programs for our families using a portion of the principal. I would hire help for the house do-it-yourself projects to speed them up. I would buy a used hybrid Jeep for myself and give my older car to our child. Nothing fancy. Story 25. We would have enough to make a down payment on a house in California. Story 26. Aside from living more comfortably, nothing. Security for our children and my aging parents. Donations to local charities. Story 27. We would now have $20 million, a fully paid house and car, and a future for our child. Best day ever. Story 28. Everybody is loyal until they get that life-changing money. Story 29. I would tell my husband to take a break. We would take a vacation, decide which organizations to donate to, and then decide where to move out of this hellhole country. Story 30. We might actually call it quits. I have been dreaming about this for a long time, but maybe we got comfortable. I think we have had ups and downs. Maybe today is one of the downs, but I think I am done. It is not that we have money issues, quite the opposite. It is just not enough to support a one-income household alone. Laughing out loud. So we will combine finances and do all the usual things together. Story 31. I would buy her a green dress, but not a real one. That would be cruel. Story 32. We accept your proposal to give us 20 million. We will prepare dinner for you as a thank you. Please send a cashier's check. Story 33. In divorce, what is mine is hers and what is hers is hers. That is not happening anymore. Story 34. We would have $20 million. I meant $1 million each. That leaves $18 million and many decisions to make. Story 35. I'd like to think more money would solve our problems, but you know how it goes, more money, more problems. Honestly, I'd be happy with a 1,500 square foot house on an acre in the suburbs and just fix my current car instead of buying a new one. The rest would go into a modest exchange-traded fund, and I'd probably only withdraw for major life events. Story 36. My husband will have 10 million to do whatever he likes, and I will have 9 million and a small house in the middle of nowhere. Story 37. There would probably be no impact on our marriage, but in other aspects of our lives there would likely be a lot. Both of our children could retire, so we would be able to spend more time with them. That would be great. Story 38. We would probably buy another island, just a small one this time. Story 39. We would both retire and spend our lives traveling the world together. Story 40. We would quit our jobs and explore every corner of the world together. The children could come too, I suppose. Story 41. Breathe a sigh of relief. Buy a house that is big enough for our needs but not too large. Set aside money for the children's college education, and plan some vacations. We would probably both work because it is good for our mental health and confidence, but being able to hire a housekeeper or someone to help with the children would give us more time together, which would help. We are pretty lucky that most of our problems can be solved with money. Story 42. We would be wealthy, buy a house, set up college funds, buy or pay off homes for friends and family members, and live exactly the same as we do now but with money. We would also invest and donate. Story 43. Why are you offering? We would probably both continue working for a while, but I would invest through a broker with instructions to follow certain politician stock profiles as guides. A large portion would go to local charities. I would look into building affordable housing in our area that is comfortable for a family of 4 to 6. Finally, I would invest a portion in an innovative project with a lasting impact, such as reducing food or water scarcity or making expensive, necessary repairs or replacements more affordable. For example, a more reliable, low-cost air conditioning or refrigeration solution. Story 44. My wife would give all of hers away, and I would be okay with that as long as we keep most of my half. We would decide together to retire with at least $5 million and to spend the rest over time. My only non-negotiable condition is a metallic blue Corvette. Neither of us is very picky, and we defer to one another all the time. Story 45. For me, I would love her the same and travel the globe together. Story 46. My wife would probably try to get us to live our best lives while I try to squirrel my share away into index funds and watch it grow. I am a boring person. Story 47. Well, first, several of my friends are getting a yard full of pink plastic flamingos. Story 48. Our house is paid off. We put the house on the market without stress. We will likely move to Denver. We will buy a similar new house that does not require the concessions we made with this one. 50% will be invested for the long term. We will likely set up a small trust for her brother. Both of her parents are retired and living comfortably, so we would give them a small amount to allow her mother to do more enjoyable activities. We will both quit our jobs and travel more. We will likely be much happier because we are no longer constantly working or stressed about money, and we can do the things we want without financial concern. Story 49. Immediate divorce. Then it's freedom and the single life. Lembos, clothes, and hoes. Story 50. We would say, holy shit, I would take some time off. We would go on a long cruise to relax and discuss what to do with our newfound wealth. We would pay off the house and the bills. Story 51. With 20 million, we would most likely consider early retirement. Story 52. House paid off, cars paid off, and a nice, long, well-deserved vacation. Then we talk to a financial advisor and set ourselves and our children up for the future. $20 million is fuck you money, and even drawing half the interest each year while invested will set us up for life very comfortably. Story 53. It would immediately reduce our current stresses to zero and simultaneously introduce new stresses. Story 54. We would be a little frustrated that we had been saving all this time for nothing, but we would immediately quit our jobs and travel the world together. After some time, we would find something productive to do for society. Story 55. Pay off our debt. My husband quits the job that has been burning him out for years and has the space and time to recover and learn something new, travel more and be much more relaxed. It will probably improve our relationship simply from reduced financial stress, to be honest. Story 56. My wife and I get along very well. The only challenges are waking up early and not having enough leisure time. I think being able to retire early would be perfect. We love our vacation time, even when we stay home and relax. Story 57. My wife has $20 million, and I have a happy wife and a happy life. Story 58. I would close my permanently open LinkedIn tab and take a nap. Story 59. My wife and I would be all set. We have loved each other through being broke, middle class, and broke again. If we had $20 million, we would spoil each other and enjoy life together. I believe this. Story 60. Of course I told her that before. There was a TV show called Windfall that was based on that. After being married, you change as a person and you find out what your partner means to you. Other variables at home and shifting priorities affect the relationship. I believe many couples stay together because they do not want to give up half of what they earned or inherited. Story 61. We would invest it in an annuity that paid 5% interest and live off $1 million per year, about $720,000 after taxes. That is roughly $2,000 per day. We would be on vacation indefinitely, flying around the world in business class with our dogs. Story 62. Instant divorce. I will make a large but sensible donation to some women and men who are scantily clothed, to the local small business pharmacists, and to the mega casino near me, preferably all at the same time. Story 63. An instant and significant reduction in stress, a paid-off house, and probably new cars. Story 64. I do not know. I am suddenly married, so I have to figure that out first. Story 65. Nothing at all. I would sign the check over to her to keep track of it and continue as I always have. I ask whether we have the money when I want to buy something. This has worked for nearly 50 years, so why rock the boat now? It seems many of our friends with separate finances have divorced or constantly fight over money. Either you support one another or you do not. Story 66. Depending on how we felt about each other, that would certainly affect things. If things were on the rocks, I would not be averse to saying, if you want to enjoy life without me, go ahead, or we can work it out and become a power couple. Not ethical non-monogamy or that kind of arrangement. If you want to have sex with other people, do it. People are often in a marriage for stability, but when you can be stable by yourself, who do you really need? Story 67. The marriage would be over. She wouldn't need to depend on me anymore. Story 68. 1. Set up trust funds for our kids. They cannot be accessed until they are 55, except in case of emergencies. 2. Sell the house and all possessions. 3. Move to a sane, reasonably warm location. Story 69. This would make everything perfect, since we would both stop doing work we do not love and begin farming full-time. Story 70. We would buy a house and travel. He would probably gamble a lot of it, and I would buy an extremely nice car. We would have around 15 million to get around on. Story 71. Nothing. We are already comfortable. This windfall would just make us rich. Story 72. What a bizarre question. We would have $20 million, and we would be happier because money would not be an issue. We would not be stressed by work, and we could make the improvements we wanted to our house or buy a new one. Some people might say they would finally leave a spouse because they are stuck in the marriage for financial reasons. I imagine almost everyone would say things have improved, and even that outcome would be better than not having the money. Story 73. Take our first vacation, just the two of us, after 14 years together. Story 74. We would have an extra $10 million, and the kids would have $5 million each, or perhaps $12 million and $4 million. They have years to invest and will inherit whatever we do not spend. Alternatively, we could give them $250,000 per year for the rest of our lives until they inherit the remainder. We would buy a place in London and another in Portugal or Spain. We would travel first class and probably not change our lifestyle much beyond that. Aside from upgrading laptops, always having the latest phones and video games, and subscribing to all the streaming services. Story 75. Married but living apart for most of the year. I will be living abroad while she prefers to stay home near our children. Story 76. She would give a lot to her family. We would have 7 or 8 all-inclusive holidays each year while the child was still at school. We would live in the same town but in a better home. Story 77. We would be much less stressed and would have a second car. We would take more and nicer vacations. We would not worry about being unable to retire and would not have to work if we did not want to. We would give a lot to charity and to some family members. We would probably be much happier overall. Story 78. My husband will retire, and we'll travel and have even more time together. Yay! Story 79. Supposing we are married and there is a postnuptial agreement. If $20 million is ours, $10 million is exclusively mine and I am not sharing my portion. We can share your portion, though. Story 80. We would each pay off debts, both ours and our immediate families. She would likely continue teaching for a while. I would try to pick up work I enjoy and stop stressing so much about it. We would keep separate accounts, transfer money as needed, and each have online access to both accounts. Our marriage would remain as solid as it is, and we would not have to worry about money again. Story 81. To the moon? We would retire immediately, buy a vacation property on the Mediterranean, renovate our primary house as a dream project, pay off the graduate school loans, and invest for stable growth. I would also buy a big bag of pistachios on every Costco trip. Story 82. Aggressive investments until the annual growth is enough to sustain both of our parents and our family comfortably, and to start a nonprofit that will not need to change policies just to cater to potential donors. Then I would start a separate investment portfolio specifically for the nonprofit to make it self-sustaining and to have enough to fund promising research in areas of medicine that the government will not provide adequate funding for. I imagine we would both be much busier, or at least I would be at first. 20 million suddenly is a rather big change and upheaval of the norm. I hope this opportunity helps bring us closer and leads to more fulfilling lives by aiding others. After the nonprofit is self-sustaining and can function independently, we would travel the world and make many new memories together. Hopefully we would have time to raise a child or two as well. Story 83. We would continue what we are doing, but with a bigger budget. I would pay off our two daughters' loans and buy our son a house. We would move or build a house with space for my project shop and my husband's hobby area. I would hire movers and organizers to handle everything related to the move. I would hire a cleaner, a personal trainer, a chef, and a gardener. We would increase our contributions to our charitable giving fund. I would buy that sports car. Story 84. I would have a lot less financial stress, but I am sure other unexpected stresses would arise and take its place. Story 85. My wife and I played this out. If we win a large amount of money, we will split it and everyone will live the life they want. Story 86. Buy the block of houses and apartments across from my child's school. Rent them to friends and family below market value to create a built-in community and passive income. Ensure there is enough money for my child to attend college and invest the remainder. Switch to part-time work. I like my job. Travel more. Story 87. Pool it like everything else. Then go on vacation to decide how to spend it and which charities to donate it to. Story 88. Honestly, probably not much. We are already good at communicating about money and have our own accounts, so 10 million each would just mean a lot more travel and much nicer date nights. Story 89. We could afford to do all the things that reduce stress. Story 90. Someone is trying to assassinate us but misunderstood the word recipient on the bank form. Story 91. Nothing really. We would probably just spend more time together. We would have so many inside jokes about being rich. I can hear us saying, let's invite the poor people over when talking about our parents, laughing out loud. Both of our parents are semi-retired millionaires, but they are not worth $20 million. We grew up in the suburbs. Maybe we would buy some land, like a small ranch to keep us busy. We have talked about it before as a retirement plan. Story 92. We would travel more in business class and do more home improvements if we had more time. We are already reasonably well off, so it would be more about luxury. Story 93. My ex, not married but together with me for 7 years, inherited a large sum of money. She bought a new car from Bayerisch Motor in Werke, had extensive plastic surgery, and told me that I was holding her back from the exciting new life she could be living. Fuck me, right? Story 94. He is going to buy some magic cards. He will work less and pay off the mortgage. He may travel more, but not much will change. Story 95. Now, instead of arguing about spending $100 on crap, we will argue about spending $10,000 on crap. Story 96. To begin, if our family suddenly received $20 million, we would pay off debts for those who were generous to us and for close family members. Then set aside money for our children so it will grow with interest. Whatever is left, we would learn to invest and make it grow. Then quit our jobs and live happily ever after while still teaching our children not to squander money and to invest for the future. Until then, I am fine living paycheck to paycheck. Story 97. We would have $20 million after paying our debts and a nice vacation planned to coincide with our enthusiastic resignation from our current jobs. Story 98. My wife is a teacher. She likes working, even though I am wealthy enough that she has not needed to work for the past 2 decades. I doubt $10 million will change her mind. I will continue to live as I have. I am not materialistic and do not desire things I cannot already afford with ease. I enjoy spending time with my wife in our backyard or living room. Money makes no difference in that. Story 99. Honestly, it would eliminate 90% of our stress-related fights. No more bickering about bills, groceries, or whether we can afford a vacation. We'd probably spend the next decade traveling and spoiling our dog. Story 100. Life would be much easier. We could hire help for childcare and cleaning, and we could afford the renovations we had planned before learning we were having twins. We could also buy a vacation home in my husband's favorite place and spend a lot of time giving our children an idyllic childhood. I do not think it would affect us much otherwise. I doubt either of us would stop working. Story 101. I'd give her a high five, say, keep on truckin', and disappear into the sunset. Story 102. Pay off all debt, including the mortgage, then do some spending. We would be left with approximately $9 million after that. What would we do with the $9 million? Invest 50% in index funds and 50% in dividend growth stocks. Using conservative estimates, we would receive about $215,000 per year after taxes. Without a mortgage or other significant debts, we would be able to retire and focus on hobbies, charitable work, and time with family and friends. That would be almost $18,000 per month after taxes, which would be transformative for our lifestyle. Story 103. Right now, I would estimate we have $20 million. I think we would do the things we want to do, travel for a while, buy new shiny cars, and maybe upgrade the home, not to a 10,000 square foot mansion, just something around 2,500 to 3,000 square feet, newer and more modern. I would do everything to keep our marriage strong and then retire. Story 104. Early retirement and lots of travel. Hopefully, we would never set foot in the United States again. Story 105. Something tells me the original poster has some disturbing thoughts about killing his significant other. Story 106. My partner could stop working and record music. I would still want to work, so I would set up a nice care home. We would have days out and have fun every day with the residents. Between traveling the world and going to many gigs, I would have a separate house for my books. I would also like to have a breast augmentation to have larger breasts. Story 107. We would quit our jobs, splurge on toppings at a frozen yogurt shop, and then be able to get married and buy a house. Story 108. We have $20 million and dual citizenship. We will be back from our vacation in November to set up a small charitable organization. Story 109. At a fundamental level, my marriage would experience no impact. The effect on our quality of life would be immense. We would be able to hike with the dogs, sit and read at the coffee shop, and have a nice little house with a workshop for each of us to build things in. It would be amazing. Story 110. Most people here do not realize the marriage will be over in 3 years. Story 111. I would leave the United States and go live in one of several other countries. Story 112. We would have $20 million and we would start traveling. It would be a dream come true. Story 113. Happiness. We already split expenses and keep any extra. Story 114. If the underlying question is how it would affect our marriage, it would not. We have been through fat times and lean times already, assuming tax-free, which makes the math easier, and assuming there are no monkey's paw strings attached. First, we would sit and stare at each other, bursting into occasional giggles. Second, we would do the boring stuff like paying off debts and helping the kids get a house. Then each of us would have a major splurge to get that out of our systems. I would buy a 1954 to 1955 Packard Caribbean convertible. She would probably buy some art, a Picasso or a Garfunkel. Maybe a fur coat, but not a real fur coat. That is cruel. Then the fun starts. Matching brokerage accounts comfortably drawing 10 to 12% annually should provide for us and allow us to help others without denting the original capital. Leave the rest to the kids and go to glory knowing that we have made the world a little better along the way. Story 115. A dream come true. We are already happy, and this would make us even happier. It would allow us to spend more time together, which is all we want. Story 116. I would definitely buy a new recliner. I have been using the same one for about 20 years, and it is worn and falling apart. Or maybe I could at least buy some duct tape for it. Story 117. What is a long-term marriage? What is a short-term marriage? Story 118. We would both get new desk chairs rather than one of us getting one now and the other getting one in a few months. Story 119. I don't know. I will quit my job, pack my bike, and ride to Ladakh. I am not sure how a wife I have not met yet will react. Will she be licensed to ride a motorcycle? Story 120. People would believe my wife has $10 million because I never told anyone about my share. Story 121. I love the comments that say they would have 20 million. I love happy marriages. Story 122. Let us quit our jobs, go on vacation, and spend more time together. Story 123. Not much. He would probably go all out buying hunting gear and continue working as usual. Story 124. We would have $20 million. We would move to a nicer house and I would quit my job and invest most of the money to live off the interest. I cannot see it helping or hurting our relationship. Story 125. We would have $20 million to spend on building a house in the country, retirement, education for our children, a few wonderful vacations, and a significant amount for charity. Story 126. We would be completely debt-free and retired in our mid-30s, travel and work out together more, and spend more time with our daughter. We could take her out of daycare entirely or only put her in part-time care so she could still spend time with friends. Ah, the life. Story 127. Oh, we would be so excited. We would quit both our jobs and get to raise our newborn without our student loans and mortgage debt weighing us down. Story 128. We could afford to hire a house cleaner, so I would say that is positive. Story 129. I would quit my job and play pickleball for the rest of my life, spending time with my wife and child. Story 130. I think our marriage would be just as strong as ever. Knowing us, it would not change who we are. I would probably quit my job and buy 1 or 2 small houses, 2,500 square feet or less, in places I like to visit regularly. Neither of us is materialistic, so the only changes would be a little more travel and more conveniences at home. I do not think we would even sell our current house. Maybe a few remodeling upgrades, but the same house. Story 131. We would put $20 million in our accounts and go on with our lives. Story 132. We would buy a house and give the rest to our financial advisor to work with. Story 133. It would be wonderful. We would rescue all the cats, especially the elderly and those who are unwell. Story 134. We would finally have time to see each other. We could even afford a babysitter to go on a date. Story 135. I am astounded at the lack of replies from people who would leave their marriages for $10 million. Based on other subreddits, it seems most would leave immediately for that amount. Story 136. The fact that no one is commenting on the phrase long-term marriage is crazy. Story 137. Get another dog. Quit our jobs and hire personal trainers to get our bodies in shape. If possible, hire a chef who can prepare meals coordinated with our nutritionist and dietitian. After a year, once we are in shape, travel the world. Story 138. $10 million each would be much better than one of us getting $20 million. Story 139. An insanely positive impact. We would no longer be limited by our lack of income. We could visit my sick in-laws in their country and stay long-term. We could finally buy a house here, start a family, and pay off all debt. It all feels like a pipe dream at this point. Story 140. I would let my husband buy the helicopter he has been talking about. Story 141. Each of us would have $10 million. When we first got together, I was terrible with finances, but she helped me get my act together. Today, we work together to set and achieve financial goals for our family. However, when we discuss a large windfall like this, usually in a what if we won the lottery conversation, our priorities diverge sharply. I focus on using the money to live comfortably and to ensure our daughter will be provided for after we are gone. My wife wants everything. She can have hers and I will have mine. Story 142. Nothing, laughing out loud. We have talked at length about what we would do with a lot of money. Story 143. We would have a lot more time to decide how to spend $20 million. Story 144. We would quit our jobs and pursue our mutual passion for world travel. Story 145. We would have $20 million and would not be stressed about every bill and expense. Story 146. I would probably invest it in my business to buy out my partners, use some of the free cash flow to increase the company's top line, and then sell it for $50 million. It would shorten the journey by a few years, and I could retire earlier. I would be happy. Story 147. My husband, instead of working from home, would be retired. I'd get a few renovations done around the house. I'd love a fancy bathroom, but other than that, I think we're fine as is. Maybe travel. Story 148. The most immediate impact would be our high fives. Story 149. We have $20 million. We will likely be traveling extensively. Story 150. One person would have $10 million more in their investments, and the other would buy some cool stuff. Story 151. Assuming it is not a fluke, it would change both our lives. I imagine he would send 1 million or 2 to his family in Europe. I would make sure my mom is taken care of, and then we would move to Alaska to live off the grid in luxury. I would invest 9 to 12 million of it into a fund that, after we are dead, pays out to charities or similar causes. In summary, get away from society and live in isolation. With Starlink as it is now, many benefits would still be available. Story 152. It makes our impending divorce much more financially manageable. Story 153. Nothing really. Upgrade our home, which is already nice. Buy a vacation home in Michigan near the water for 3 to 4 million. Put the rest away. Story 154. Laughing out loud. What is a long-term marriage? Aren't marriages supposed to be long-term? Story 155. We would definitely stop being cheap and supersize everything. Story 156. Kicking off our shoes with a burst of joy and taking a long vacation. Story 157. We each put $5 million in our personal accounts and $10 in our joint account. We had separate accounts when we married and kept them, then opened a joint account. We have access to all but one of her accounts. She and a friend have a business together. I do some freelance work for that business and have a debit card for expenses, but I am not on the business account and I do not want to be. Story 158. How difficult would it be to have sex on a pile of money? Story 159. We would probably have sex on a pile of money, then return to our normal business. Story 160. My wife would go on a shopping spree, we would buy a house, and I would invest in our retirement. Story 161. My wife would likely want to buy a property closer to one of our children and spend more time there. Fine by me. I might hire a winter snow clearing service for my property. Story 162. We would be even better set for retirement. We have been married 38 years and have been preparing for retirement the whole time. That would be a great boost. Story 163. I would have a slightly larger house and 2 new cars. I would return to my old job at her workplace to obtain insurance. I would take many more vacations. Story 164. We would have $20 million, retire, travel, and enjoy our lives together. We would be more present with each other and our kids and have less need to decompress after working all day. Story 165. Probably, instead of planning for 2 or 3 children, it would be 4 or 5. Story 166. Not much. Maybe less stress. We'd both be able to quit our jobs and travel to the places we dream of visiting. Story 167. My wife earns much more than I do, and I find that reassuring. I once read a statistic that about 60% of women would leave their spouse if they were financially independent. If we were both given money, I am confident we would enjoy it and use it to enrich our lives. Story 168. Checking the clauses in our insurance policies. Story 169. I would be less tired. We would be much happier. That is an easy one. Story 170. You just won the lottery. How does this change your marriage, other than the usual you are now rich effects? Story 171. Based on my past marriage, my ex-wife inherited approximately $500,000 and decided that meant she did not need to stay because of my income. We would have divorced because she had an affair, but instead of 9 years of constant battles over every issue, the split would have been quicker because we were both far wealthier than before. She spent the entire inheritance in under 18 months. At that rate, $10 million would likely be gone already or at least deeply depleted, since 12 years have passed. Story 172. I don't know, original poster, what did you expect? A bloody battle to the death for the other 10 million? A John Wick-style gentleman's duel at dawn? We obviously just spent it all on hookers and blow. Story 173. We would distribute the funds to benefit our circumstances and our families. Story 174. We would have $20 million. We would probably quit our jobs, finish raising the kids, and then retire overseas. Story 175. We would retire early and have a second child because we could afford it. We would probably do a lot of homeschooling and travel. Story 176. $10 million would go into our foster son's special needs trust. The other $10 million would pay off all our debts, including the mortgage, car loan, and credit cards, and we would have whatever remained to spend as we wished. Keep in mind we are already financially stable, so more money would not change the marriage dynamic. Story 177. We would invest the majority so we have interest income to live on. We would both keep working because we have good years ahead and need health insurance. However, each of us would work less than 80% of full-time. Story 178. We would both retire as soon as possible and start traveling the world. It would be awesome. Story 179. We would be very happy. No more work. We would travel the world and have no worries about the cost of home remodeling. Story 180. We would be able to pay off our school and car loans. We would then make sure we have our daughter set up for her future. We would definitely go on a big vacation and then figure out how to invest and save for retirement. Story 181. I will tell my husband, no, weekly, when his latest attention deficit hyperactivity disorder obsession hits. We will buy a house with space for a swing in the living room, a bathtub in the bathroom, and 3 walk-in closets for him, me, and guests. Story 182. Legally speaking, in most of the United States, assuming you both inherited this money, you each own your own $10 million separately, but any interest and capital gains on the money are marital property. Story 183. She would have an intervention to get me off Facebook Marketplace. Story 184. Since we are in a long-term marriage rather than a short-term marriage, I do not think that capital gains tax applies. The proceeds will probably be taxed as ordinary income. Story 185. My wife has always wanted to go on a year-long trip to see the world. I would let her do that while I stay home with the children. She has earned it. Story 186. We would quit our jobs and do whatever we wanted for a year. Story 187. We would quit work and leave California. Done. As they say, ride off into the sunset. Story 188. I would be like the customers at my workplace and never leave the house. She might not like that. Story 189. Pay off all our debts. Move to a bigger house with a garage in the part of town that has better schools. Buy new cars. Open a crafting business. Story 190. We would buy a lake house, start a couple of college funds for our kids, help our families a little, hire a housekeeper, invest, and retire. Nothing else would really change. Story 191. I do not know. I think we would need to have a conversation about moving into a home and each paying half, then separating our finances and doing whatever we want with them. If either of us were entering the arrangement for financial reasons, it would be a good time to split. Story 192. Years ago, I met a California lottery winner. Her husband left her that very night, and she said almost no marriage of a winner survives the first year. Story 193. Years ago, I met a winner of the California lottery. Her husband left her that same night. She said almost no marriage of a lottery winner survives the first year. Story 194. Years ago, I met a California lottery winner. Her husband left her that night, and she said almost no marriage of a lottery winner survives the first year. Story 195. Am I the only one who's surprised that you had to add long-term before marriage? Story 196. Invest. Retire. Purchase a good house in a nice area as a baseline. Obtain citizenship in another country that isn't the United States. Live my life free from modern-day slavery. Story 197. After going on vacation, we would fulfill our fantasy of replanting a forest. We would also buy or build our first house. Story 198. Many people do not realize how many couples are reasonably happy in their relationships, but because comfort and building a life together are a large part of those relationships, some would choose to stay together if they feared their comfort or finances would be affected. This is especially true of older couples. They like each other, get along, and have a routine. They know that separation could prevent them from retiring or substantially reduce their standard of living, so it does not seem worth the risk. An influx of money might change their thinking. Story 199. I honestly have no idea. We would pay off our house and our car, which is our only debt. My wife would want to give most of the money away. I would want to put about $5 million into a savings and investment account. I would also want to buy a lot of electronics and other items, but she would not want that. Story 200. After going on vacation, we would fulfill our fantasy of replanting a forest and buy or build our first house. Story 201. We would put it in our various investment accounts and our children's college funds, then go on a trip to Rome. Story 202. We would have no debt, a healthy savings account, and we would go on vacation for the first time in years. Story 203. I love my wife, but I know her well enough to foresee disagreements about whether to spend or invest the money. Since we both have the same amount, we would probably split it amicably. I would give her the house worth $200,000. Having $10 million and no job in Manhattan or San Francisco is not a lot, but if you move to Kansas or a similar place, you can be set for life. Story 204. We would pay off all current debts and cover our children's college tuition. My wife would probably quit her job. She is exploring starting her own business and would pursue it because it is driven by passion rather than money. I would not quit my job but would scale back substantially. My job rewards extra work with additional pay beyond the base salary. I would keep the job I enjoy and earn only the base salary. Story 205. I want to be able to pay for my children's college in the next 10 years. Story 206. We stay together, and now I get yelled at for my more expensive toys while she quietly orders luxurious items. So it's just normal life, I guess. I don't know what the return policy is on those luxury items. Feels like she enjoys the hunt more than the ownership. Story 207. My husband would say you can have my share, babe, but then he would pout like a puppy until I buy him a sports car or a boat. Story 208. The house would be paid off. Vehicles and computers would be replaced. I may or may not keep my job. We would set aside money for retirement and travel. Story 209. We get to have a bigger second wedding with more friends and family, pay off our house and the in-laws' house. Then I get a job I love and my lover gets to stay home, brew mead and blow up computers. Story 210. I would have 10 million and she would have 10 million to use as we each see fit. Our finances are separate except for joint expenses like the mortgage, bills, and other shared costs. We would probably decide to pay off the house, maybe quit our jobs, and live off the interest or invest in other money-making opportunities. Story 211. We buy each other all the things we know we would never get for ourselves. Story 212. My wife will want to go house shopping and quit her job to spend more time with the children. I would probably invest at least $10 million and set up trusts. That is about it. Story 213. If I were still married to the same person I married many years ago, I would keep the 10, and he would keep his 10. Story 214. My wife would be broke, and I would have $10 million. Story 215. I think the more interesting question is whether only one partner receives $10 million. Such a disparity is more likely to cause conflict than an equal distribution. Story 216. I think many people in this thread are underestimating how much receiving this amount of money on such short notice would change one or both partners. I would give a quarter of these marriages at most 5 years. Story 217. No change whatsoever. We would definitely take many more Viking River cruises. Story 218. It depends. If my wife could convince Alan Richson to run away with her for $10 million, I would be single. Otherwise, the outlook is great. We would travel and have fun. Story 219. There would not be an impact on our marriage. It would affect every other aspect of our lives. Story 220. He must give half of his money to our son, and I must give half of mine to our daughter or vice versa. Now we each have 5 million. I will see him when I am done traveling the world because he will not get on an airplane. Story 221. Both retire and live happily ever after? What kind of question is this? Laughing out loud. Story 222. Realistically, I think we have $10 million, and our child has the same amount stashed away. Story 223. Oh, we would be so relieved. We'd buy a house, take a vacation, invest half of it, put a quarter in savings, and give the last quarter to friends, family, and charities. Then we would do whatever we wanted for the rest of our lives, which for her would involve a lot of horses, and for me would involve taking a pug to exotic locations to see how he likes them. Story 224. Shelter dogs and vintage guitars as far as the eye can see. Story 225. We would have $20 million before taxes. We would retire to spend more time with each other. Why? Do you have $20 million to give away? Story 226. If my husband and I each received $10 million, we would almost immediately try for a second child. The only thing keeping us from doing so is our finances. Story 227. We are retiring. Let us kick things off with a month on Oahu to relax and decide what to do next. Story 228. We would start traveling the world nonstop in the greatest of luxury. We are old. We would be okay with blowing it all. Story 229. I'm guessing this question is meant to elicit the response. I divorce him and fuck a hot Chad because I don't need his cuck money anymore, or some bullshit. Cringe. Story 230. We have $20 million. No debt, a nice chunk of savings, and my spouse can become the stay-at-home parent they would love to be. I love my job, so I would keep it for the benefits. Aside from being a lot more stress-free, our daily lives probably would not change much. Story 231. Both of us will quit our jobs on the same day, pay off our home loan, and live happily ever after. Story 232. I have a deal with my partner. If either of us wins, we split the winnings, and that gives the other partner the chance to leave the relationship with no questions asked and no hard feelings. Story 233. We have 20 million combined. We buy property, pay debts, invest in a new set of vehicles that are more reliable, and take care of medical and dental expenses we have not been able to afford. From there, we live life as normal. Story 234. It would take nearly $1 million to pay off our student loans. Then we would go from there. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.